Good morning and welcome back to Tactics Board. Norwich City are in championship action this weekend when they travel to Ewood Park to face Blackburn Rovers. The fixture list has been a little bit kinder to them in the last few weeks after what was a difficult month or so, on paper at least, for the Canaries. But they're in good form, they're in championship playoff contention, but with the teams around them picking up some good form now, there is pressure on them to deliver in Lancashire. I'm going to be delivering a tactical preview and predicted starting 11 for the game in this video, and without further ado, this is the 11 I think David Wagner will trust to do the job for him. So I've gone for Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Grant Hanley and Kenny McLean at centre back, with Sam McCallum at left back, Marcelino Nunez and Gabriel Sara in the centre of midfield, with Ono Hernandez on the right, Borja Sainz on the left and Ashley Barnes behind. Josh Sargent up front at the back. Angus Gunn, again, no complaints. There hasn't been too much for him to do in the last few games. I know Norwich have conceded a few goals, but not too many of them have been ones where he can do much about it. When he's been called upon, he's still been very reliable for the Canaries, and his distribution has been a key part of how they've been building the ball up from the back, and probably doing that a little bit quicker than they were previously. I think this good form has also been partly down to how they've been building the ball from the back, and you can't underestimate, of course, in the modern game, how important the goalkeeper is in that. It's pretty much the same story every week on Tactics Board with Angus Gunn, and that is that I can't see him being dropped anytime soon, and so for that reason, I've gone for him in goal. Jack Stacey, similarly good in recent weeks. He's sort of gone under the radar, and I suppose that's not unexpected for a right back, not one of the most glamorous positions, although it is getting up there. But under David Wagner, we know how important it is. That was one of the things that when he arrived at the club, tactically we were highlighting as a really attacking position in his team, a really important position in his team when it comes to creativity. And I think Jack Stacey, positionally, defensively, and with his end product, has improved leaps and bounds really in the last few months, or come on leaps and bounds in the last few months. And where I think he started the season really well, he had that poor period. Now I think he's getting back towards, or in fact maybe even better than, that form at the start of the season. He's been a vital part, even under the radar, of this good form, and I'd be very surprised if he was dropped. At centre-back, Grant Hanley and Kenny McLean, and again there was a bit of a decision to be made, but of course they did fairly well against Cardiff. I think McLean has admitted in his pre-match presser for the Blackburn game that against Cardiff he made what he defended, as he said, like a midfielder for their goal. But other than that, I thought he was fairly reliable. Of course, the benefits of having him at the back from a distribution perspective really can't be understated, and as I said, that's vitally important in how Norwich have been playing and how they've been dominating possession a little bit more and seemed a bit more proactive with their setup in the last few weeks. So in Ben Gibson's absence, Kenny McLean really stepped up in that sense. Of course, he's back now, so that's where that sort of decision comes in, and given Norwich are away from home, I did consider whether maybe Kenny McLean would be back in midfield to try and give Wagner's team a little bit more solidity. But with how Blackburn set up and how direct they can be, I wouldn't be surprised if he wants to keep Kenny McLean at centre-back. Of course, what's good about McLean's game is fairly replicable in Ben Gibson's game, but with how good Marcelino Nunez has been as well, he wants to keep him in that team, I would guess, or at least I would want to keep him in that team. But that just shows you the sort of decisions that the manager, or the head coach in this case, has to make when a team is doing really well, because out of that trio, McLean, Gibson and Nunez, you'd suggest probably one has to miss out, which is a shame because they've all been in fantastic form in recent weeks. And although I think it's a close call between all three of those, I've just gone based on sort of recent momentum, the importance of momentum, as both Wagner and McLean talked about in the press conference. It feels like after two quite emphatic wins and a very good win indeed against Cardiff, one of the best performances of the season, that maybe Wagner is more likely to err on the side of not changing things and going for McLean at centre-back. But again, that's not one of my most sure predictions, and I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up changing sort of two out of those three of McLean, Nunez and Gibson. So that'll be an interesting one to watch out for, but I've gone for McLean and Hanley. At centre-back, at left-back, Sam McCallum, and again there's a bit of a decision for David Wagner to make. He's been choosing Dimitris Yannoulis over Sam McCallum throughout the season, really. But McCallum, whenever he's been called upon, has stepped up, had another good game against Cardiff, very dangerous. His balls into the box have been pretty consistent this season, and defensively, I think he's, although not totally secure, a little bit less suspect than Giannoulis can be at times, and maybe even a little bit underrated. In fact, if you look at the sort of contract debate and the players who are out of contract, although it does feel like the large majority of those players will be leaving Carrow Road in the summer, it feels like Norwich are really increasingly having a decision to make on McCallum, because he's a player, especially when they look likely to lose another fullback in Giannoulis, that they might want to keep around. And with the good age that he's at and the good form that he's shown at the back end of this season, I think he is campaigning to extend that contract. But again, based on the continuity and the momentum that Norwich are building, the fact that they've had a full week to prepare for this Blackburn game, and there won't be any sort of unnecessary changes, it will all be for tactical and technical reasons. I think just based on recent performances, it would make sense if Wagner went for McCallum. But again, Giannoulis has been his favourite pretty much throughout the season, so that wouldn't be too much of a surprise. Either going into midfield, Marcelino Nunez, who I already spoke about, and Gabriel Sara, who I think is really getting back towards that sort of form that we saw earlier on in the season. He spoke after the Watford game, which was actually, in general play, a really poor game for him before he, of course, came out with that world-class moment to make it 3-2 to Norwich, to really give them the momentum and the positivity in the game that they needed. And I think since then he's been sort of back on it. Another goal against Cardiff, a very good free kick, albeit slightly deflected, but his general play was a little bit better against the Bluebirds. There was a recognition from him when he spoke after that Watford game, about the need to improve his form, and I think he has done that recently. So the signs for Sara are very, very good. He's pretty much undroppable. I think he's still started every single championship game this season and some non-championship games. So I'm sure he's feeling a little bit wary of that, but with this distance left until the end of the season and the goal in such close sight, I'd be surprised if he isn't motivated by that, and I'd be incredibly surprised if he isn't in the team to take on Blackburn Rovers. On the right, I've got Onel Hernandez, who maybe didn't shine as brightly against Cardiff as he did against Watford, but still a fairly decent game. And with Jonathan Rowe out injured, it's a little bit of a decision to make that maybe people didn't really expect, with Christian Fastnack now having scored in 2 consecutive games, 2 fairly decent finishes. I think the Watford one, he probably will feel that there was a little bit more luck involved than the Cardiff one, which was a nice move, combining with fellow substitute Sidney van Hooijdonk. So I'm sure he's sort of pushing for a start as well now. But Onel Hernandez has been somebody who's stepped up in these last few games. In the absence of Rowe, you'd worry about that creativity, about the quality coming from wide areas, but both Fastnack and Hernandez have stepped up. And given how much Wagner trusts Fastnack, of course, he was a huge part in him coming to the club in the summer, and he has been delivering in recent weeks. That's another close decision that Wagner has to make. And you wouldn't think that there was the capacity for all these changes when Norwich have been playing so well, but that's testament to the quality and depth in recent weeks, how well the substitutes have been playing, and it will be an interesting one to see where Wagner goes on the right. But just conservatively, I've gone for Onel Hernandez, because I think if the formula works, even if the formula is bringing a fairly good goal scorer in recent weeks onto the pitch as a substitute, then why change the formula? But I could see why Wagner would go with Fastnack as well. On the left-hand side, Borja Sainz, who hasn't maybe been delivering in terms of the end product as much as he has at other times in the season, but works incredibly hard. I was speaking to a fan in the fan reaction after the QPR game, and they said just when you watch Borja Sainz, he works incredibly hard, and actually if you just track him even for a few minutes, it feels like he never stops sprinting. So very difficult to criticise his performances, although you'd maybe like to see a couple more goals and assists from someone who is clearly very capable of producing them, but I don't think any threat for him, especially on the left-hand side, of dropping out of the team. Up front, Ashley Barnes and Josh Sargent, and Van Hooijdonk is banging on the door to try and get into that starting 11. Of course, that assist that I mentioned for Fastnack, we actually spoke to him on Wednesday and he felt that his moment was coming, but I don't think his starting moment will be at Blackburn Rovers. We know how Ashley Barnes will be welcomed, obviously as a former Burnley man, and the heated rivalry that they have. I think he's not necessarily loved by opposition fans across the country, let alone Blackburn Rovers. So I'm sure he'll be in for a very interesting reception, but I don't think that will change Wagner's plans on who he starts up front. And based on the performances from both him and Josh Sargent in the last few weeks, it would be very, very difficult to change that front two. And we know how important Sargent is, of course, to round it off. Already 10 goals this season, despite having missed a huge chunk of it, and anyone that's watched Norwich this season or even last, to be honest, knows what capabilities Josh Sargent has at this level. So it'll be interesting to see how Norwich get on against Blackburn Rovers. That's of course the 11 that I think Wagner will choose. And in terms of the tactical setup that they face, I think he was open in his press conference that he felt that Blackburn would be quite direct, and under John Eustace they have been more than they were under Jon Dahl Tomasson. Of course, he was maybe a little bit more progressive or slow build in how he brought the ball up the pitch. Eustace has talked about coming in and not having too much time on the training pitch, so his priority has been making Blackburn harder to beat, going maybe slightly more direct and taking fewer risks. And in one sense that might play into the hands of Wagner's group. At the back they have aerially very good players in Hanley and McLean who will be adept at stopping those sorts of situations, and they have got a bit of pace in that defence as well, although you look at the ages of those players and it feels unlikely. Hanley and McLean do still have a decent amount of pace left in them, especially compared to the rest of the Norwich defence. So if they do play the starting 11 that I expect they do, I think they will have the upper hand in that sense. They have struggled at times to break down deeper defenses, but that was sort of the setup that Cardiff provided when they came to Carrow Road, and Norwich found it fairly easy to cut through them and to create opportunities. And you have to remember, this is a team that's in the bottom half of the Championship, so it's not one that, even though they are a little bit more direct, they do try and be a little bit more hard to beat. It's not a team that has shown that they're highly capable of doing that this season. So it's one where you go into it, and Norwich probably should expect to win this game. And if they have hopes of the playoffs and then eventually the Premier League, these are the games at this type of the season where you have to really take advantage. But I think, or this time of the season, sorry, that you have to take advantage. But the QPR game will be in the back of their minds. I'm sure that was a very similar opportunity to this one, and I think the Norwich fans will maybe be more wary of that than they were going into the QPR game. They haven't been excellent away from home, and it is a different test to Carrow Road, where they've been absolutely excellent this season. So they'll need to turn it on away from home, but if they can take this momentum that they've been building in NR1 into the game, then it should provide David Wagner's side with a decent chance. So let's hope that they can get something from it. Of course, we'll have all the coverage you need across Pinken channels. Go to pinken.com/subscribe if you haven't already, to learn more about how you can access our subscriber exclusive columns, analysis, video, audio, the Pinken Plus app. It's obviously very ad light and probably a better user experience. So yeah, plenty of reasons why you should subscribe, and pinken.com/subscribe is the place to go for that. That's all my plugging done, apart from actually join our WhatsApp channel. But apart from that, thank you for joining me on Tactics Board, and I'll see you very soon, hopefully after a win for Norwich City at Ewood Park.